Alright, so this is the first ever episode of the Chipz&Gram podcast. I am your co-host, Andrew Chippy Chaparro, and I am here with the lovely, as always,
Grandma. In the olden days, it was Gamma Fences.
Grandma Vince, a.k.a. Gamma Haha.
Yes.
A.k.a. grandmother to us all. So right now, because it is the first episode, the format is kind of loose. Things might change. We might, switch it up here and there. But really, kind of just want to start with personal news. Like what's going on with us, what's happening. Because I feel like we talked about Grandma, like that's what we want this podcast a lot to be, is about like family and, kind of like
and
a record.
Yes, a record of, and we eventually, I personally would love every single member of the family to eventually be a guest.
That would be awesome. Yes,
that would be super incredible. I think beyond family, if anything ever happens, I think, which you've helped me with, Andrew, is the generational thing.
Oh.
I feel very, very honored that you respect, of course you respect me, I'm your grandmother, but that you respect and seek my opinion.
Oh. Yeah.
And and Andrew, that doesn't always happen. And I think that is something very, very special. And if this ever catches on for whatever reason, I hope it catches on for that reason, to where that there are men and women out there who want to recognize the generations of their family and connect with them. And instead of them just being the boomer, to listen and exchange respectfully and intelligently. So I don't know where that came from.
No, I love that, Grandma.
It just came out. That was organic.
And I honestly felt a very similar way in that you have a very unique perspective in like lived experience in all that you've done in your life, in who you are as a person. And I love to get that perspective, when it comes to, even like random newer subjects, but like especially, when it comes to life and when it comes to, like what, essentially like where changes have occurred and where, like life is kind of like diverged, essentially. Like there are certain things, especially where like I'm just like I want to know. I'm like, what does Grandma think about this? Like life has changed so much from when like you were young to where we're at now. And, like you've seen the cycles of life come and go, essentially, and I feel like our society and I feel like life is very cyclical in that way. So like you've seen the repeats of like, oh yeah, like for example, like Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump.
Okay, one moment. Let's just cue the opening sound of Lion King. I'm sorry, Andy, for the interruption. Grandma can't just go without having to interrupt to make a joke. But it's mutual, Andrew. It's mutual. I'm hungry to find out from you and my daughters, my son-in-laws, and my grandchildren perspectives and views.
I love that. Grandma, because I feel like you're a great example of this. I hate this cliche of like, oh, well, they come from a different generation, so, we can't have that conversation with them. Bullshit, right? Like, fuck that. Yeah. That is silly. Like, my grandma, like, I've had so many conversations, in-depth conversations, and we've gone back and forth.
Yeah.
And I've changed...
Thank you, COVID.
Right? And I've changed my opinion on things, and I feel like my grandma has even just, like, learned...
Absolutely.
Right, from our discourse.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, and I think she's the epitome of like anyone at any time, as long as you keep your mind open, can receive new knowledge and they can alter their opinion. Things can change.
Oh, thank God.
Right?
Thank God. Not all of us can, but thank God some of us can.
Like, and it is sometimes scary to encounter, even at like my age, to encounter adults who've already run into the point where they're like, yeah, no, I'm tired of learning things. I don't need to pick up any new knowledge anymore. Like, I'm good. And you're kind of like, that's kind of crazy. Like, they just want more reinforcing facts.
But for some people, though, Andrew, because I'm trying to be that compromising person.
Right.
For some people, that's their happy place. That's their comfortable place.
True. Very
they don't
true.
They love the opinions that they formed. Okay?
Yeah.
They're comfortable. They've made this nest, whether they're your age or my age.
Mm-hmm.
People love to make a nest. And whether the wind blows or the rain comes down or there's sleet, snow, whatever, and it messes up the nest, they don't like it.
No, I think you're very right, Grandma. And I think to build on that same point, like, I think it's also a very difficult thing to hold, like two opposing ideas in your head at the same time, right? And to accept that, like, the world isn't black and white, and there's shades of gray, in the world. But I would prefer it if there was just good and bad, and I knew exactly who was good and who was bad.
Yeah.
Right? Based on titles, or based on reason, or based on logic, whatever you want. Like, it would be great if it was just one and one. Like, but that doesn't exist.
No. And that's a sad state of things, but you and I, okay, we're doing this, okay? And even if, that old adage to where even, the teacher, if I can just teach one student, whatever,
Yes.
whether it's teaching somebody to fish, whatever it is to where it would be totally awesome if you and I ever got a text or an email or some kind of a message that a grandchild and a grandparent touched base with each other. And not doing a podcast, but having conversations, listening to each other. I mean, I didn't want to call this generations. That's just too pat. There's got to be another term. But that's the only one I can come with right now.
Generational.
That this is a generational exchange.
Ooh.
Maybe that would be the title.
That is
generational exchanges.
Yeah,
because it doesn't just have to be grandparents and grandkids.
Right.
It can be parents and kids.
Yes.
Okay? It can also be siblings.
Totally.
Because you have younger siblings. And there's a differential within families. So, okay. That's getting a little too deep. Let's go back to our regular topics. But...
No, I love the idea. I love where it's going.
And what name did I give us again, Andrew? Because I just had a sip of wine.
Generational exchanges.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So now is the time. I don't know if you remember that or not. Alec Baldwin was one of the first ones. The old SNL skits where they did the NPR voices.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Are we going to do the NPR voices?
I'm Kai Rizdal. We're going to play 3 hours of soft jazz.
Okay, so back on topic. What's current right now, Andrew? Was there a particular topic today? Because I think we are, how far into it are we right now? Like 15, 20 minutes?
9.
No, 9 minutes. That was,
Like
the sound test was 6 minutes and that went fast.
Right?
This was a slow 9 minutes.
That's fair. And I feel like we didn't, even get into the beginnings. Like, obviously we're talking about us and whatnot.
Yes.
And that's just the first part. The next part, with general news.
All right.
So going kind of off the story you were telling me about, right? Which is where we had was it Rachel Powell,
Yes.
who has 8 children, who's 40, and was sentenced for her participation in the January 6th insurrection.
Yes.
Just to give context to this, because like obviously some people would say, well, January 6th was just people walking into the Capitol. It was just people hanging out and having a good time, you know? Like, she smashed a window with an ice axe.
Backing up. Because this is going to be one of the things, though, Andrew.
Yeah.
Is that we need to be absolutely unadulterated, bare, and honest, okay?
Yeah.
And not just that day, when I'm watching live feeds,
Right.
okay? But subsequently, there are lots of scenarios where people are maybe respectfully, but people entering, okay, and engaging with people in the building, non-threatening, kind of roaming around as like tourists. I mean, there's lots of that.
There is
okay, undeniably.
True.
Undeniably.
True.
Okay, and we need to recognize that, and to where there are people who were there that day that either they've never been exposed to the other footage, or they refuse to look at that footage, or they've been told that that footage is false news. Okay, but those people will never, ever, ever believe the true violence that was taking place. That's my belief. Okay?
And I understand that, because I feel like as much as you could say the whole thing was mob mentality, that is too simplistic, and it's a little too reductionist.
Yes.
Because obviously we know for certain that there were literal groups of bad actors. The Proud Boys were present.
Yes.
And they were trying to literally orchestrate and strategize how to best get into the Capitol.
Absolutely.
We saw the tunnel footage of literal like fighting in the tunnel between riot police and protesters.
Yes.
Right? So we saw all that, and I do think you're right. It is simplistic to say everyone who was there was in on the act, and everyone who was there was trying to commit treason.
Thank you, Andrew.
Right?
Yes.
I do agree with you there.
Yeah.
And I do think that like unfortunately similar I hate to make the comparison. I really hate to make the comparison. But when some sides make the comparison to Antifa and they say, well, everyone who's protesting on the left is Antifa.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes.
And everyone who's out there is trying to burn down buildings and start riots and chaos.
Yes.
Right? And I'm like, well...
We're talking Portland.
Right? You're like, this is a little crazy to assume that is like, you know...
Exactly, yeah.
And I'll be honest, like, because also I do feel like when we talk about like these two separate groups, like...
Yes.
One of which, if we're going to talk about like, specifically... MAGA supporters, that is a much more organized group, which we've seen through emails and text messages and such from the Trump campaign and orchestrated through the RNC, that there is direct messaging to that support group of, hey, this is what's going on, and this is what you should think, and this is what you should believe. When we talk about groups like Antifa or Black Lives Matter even, what we're really talking about is like not a centralized group of people that receive a top-down order. We're talking about decentralized. We're talking about communities that come together at a certain point to fight back against what they believe shouldn't exist in their community.
Okay. Back up.
Yeah.
Because maybe I'm not online as much as you are. Okay? Please define... Because I personally feel there's a difference, not just a difference, there's a big difference between Antifa and BLM. Oh. And Antifa has been around for what? At least a decade? And BLM is what? 4 years? Okay.
Right. Being
And
fairly young.
and there, please tell me there's a difference, because I
Yeah.
personally
And-
would never ever support anything Antifa. That's against everything that I believe. The way I feel disgusted, okay, with the violence that some people, not all of them, that some people did on January 6th, that disgusted me.
Mm-hmm.
The Antifa antics, you know what, antiques, that's too mild. I'm sorry. The Antifa violence disgusts me as much. So, you tell me, is there a division between Black Lives Matter and Antifa?
Yeah,
or did Antifa invent Black Lives Matter?
Jesus Christ, no, Grandma.
Okay,
The whole
okay,
reason
great.
I even
Thank you,
the
thank
whole reason
you.
I even drew a parallel
Okay,
between
thank
them
you. Thank you.
is
Thank you.
because they are both decentralized groups that were created within their own communities to
Okay.
represent specific issues
That's what I thought.
that they had.
And I thought, man, okay.
And the whole like Antifa thing, which I feel like both you could say have been. You could even say like MAGA has been co-opted by its worst representatives, right?
Yes.
Because you could say there are very moderate people who also support, you know.
Which is, I was saying, Andrew, at the very beginning, they're not all these evil devil people.
Of course not. It's just the loudest voices. They're the loudest
Yes.
voices in the room. And if we're being honest, like, there aren't really loud voices on the other side. There's just news coverage to say that, like, hey man, like, these riots happened and we think Antifa was involved and we think, you know, and so to say, like, Antifa was involved, for one, is to say that they're an organization that has a power structure and that has a top-down leadership and some sort of a community that you can call upon in every area. Like, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about an organization. I'm like, but in interviews with these people who would even say that they're Antifa, because people don't even like that title. Even though when we say Antifa, what are we really saying, Grandma? What does Antifa stand for?
I was going to just say,
Yeah.
explain the acronym.
Anti-fascist. And I feel like every American is anti-fascist. Yeah, who the fuck is on the side of the Nazis? Who is out here saying, yeah,
Proud Boys?
yes, Trevor, like, there is a minority out here who is saying, yes, genocide, please. Continue that. Like,
I thought, I honestly, Andrew, and that's my ignorance. I thought Antifa was an acronym.
fair. And the whole point being then that, like,
And it's why I need to talk to you.
yeah, if it's a the problem with decentralized movements, then, Grandma, is like anyone who decides to claim that they rep the decentralized movement or that they run a part of the decentralized movement, well, obviously, why wouldn't I believe them, or why wouldn't I put them on the news and be like, oh, well, this is a leader of Antifa, and you know, this is their plan, and this is what they're doing. To say that, like, one or even like two or three, you know, people who you've interviewed and like, oh, well, this is Antifa's message because we talked to a few of them, you know, like, is once again reductionist. Even more so, I would say, than me saying that, like, all MAGA, you know, is extreme, or all people associated with MAGA are extremists.
And they're not.
And they're not.
No.
Like, but to say that, like, I know what the other than that they're anti-fascist, that I know what the actual agenda is for Antifa, and I know what the agenda is for Black Lives Matter. No! Who the fuck knows?
No.
Because there's no written list of agenda. No, if anything, I feel like both BLM and Antifa were responses. Were responses to, and we've kind of talked about Occam's razor, and how, like, our society in politics kind of swings from left to right, and then eventually comes to a middle at some point where we're kind of like, oh, this is kind of okay, but eventually we swing one way or the other. And it just tends to happen in these ways. And what happens when we swing a little too far one way or the other is we get resistance.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. There's a reason that natural resistance pops up. Things have gone a little too far for people.
Yes.
They've gone a little too extreme for people, right? And you could say that, like, transphobia is a response directly to people being progressive and open-minded.
Yeah.
Right? Because what was it before? It was homophobia, right, Grandma?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and what was it before that? It was like racism and like the fighting against desegregation. Like it's always been one thing or another of like this new group of people that I don't understand. I don't like them. I don't understand them and I don't like them and they're weird. So stop it. Stop it now. You know, I feel like is.
And I'm not saying that it was created by politicians, but politicians absolutely, in the history, not just currently, they latch onto that.
Yes.
And they use it, they screw with it, they manipulate it, they scare the shit out of people with it. And I think that's why we are where we are right now, is that you and I just discussed this the other day, is to where the House of Representatives,
Yes.
it flips every 2 years.
Yep.
And nothing gets done in the House of Representatives because it takes 2 years to get reelected. So that's what you're doing. You're spending your time getting reelected. And how do you get reelected? Being loud and saying, I want to be careful. I don't want to just throw stuff against the wall. I don't want to say crazy stuff. But just saying things to where they get people emotionally involved in wanting to vote for you.
Yes.
And how do you get people to vote for you? Is to vote for me is to technically vote against the other person. So then the other person needs to be turned into a demon. Maybe not a demon, but not a good person. Not a person who's looking out for you and for your best interests. I'm looking out for your best interests, okay? So you elect me. And so whatever district I'm living in, whatever district I'm running my campaign in, let me see. Is it a farming community? Is it a metropolitan area? Is it a coastal area? And what are their fears? And this is what their campaigns do, is they look for the fears of the people who are going to vote, and then that's what you do. And I'm calling, okay, now we're going to get into some language right now, because Grandma just finished her 1.5 glasses of wine.
Right, this is not a dry podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
This is not a dry podcast. So, politicians, especially House of Representatives, I'm calling you out, motherfuckers. Prove to me that this is not true. That this is what you and your campaign committee does. Is to wherever you are, whatever you're doing. And I'm talking Republican, Democrat, and so-called independent. All of you motherfuckers. This is what you do with millions and millions of dollars that end up being billions of dollars that could be feeding people, that could be fixing infrastructure. And this is what you're doing.
And just to tack on to that, because as you were explaining it and we were going over it, I was immediately starting to think, this is what happens when, for one, you disenfranchise your voters, so they feel powerless for the most part until an election comes up. One, and then you also. And I don't know that the second part, like, because the House of Representatives, in terms of power, in terms of things that they can do, hasn't changed. It's just the fact that because it is so divided, that that even the possibility of passing legislation or getting change done has become almost impossible, right? So now, then it becomes, okay, well now we can't even promise that we're going to pass legislation or laws that are going to help my constituents.
Nope.
So then it becomes a race to the bottom, Grandma, like you were saying, where, okay, I can't promise my constituents that I can give them positive change in their life, but I can tell them that the other guy is going to fuck their shit up. That he's gonna ruin everything.
And I'm gonna try my hardest.
Right, I'm gonna try so hard, and when I mean try, like I'm gonna not pass anything because the best thing to do is to obstruct actual legislation, and then to blame it on the opposition, because then you get to also blame the government as a whole and be like, well, the government is inefficient, and the government is failing you as a whole. Like, all of a sudden, you get to take all the burden off of yourself, even when you don't fulfill what your office is meant to do.
They are sleeping at night, Andrew. I can't say that's necessarily true. That was snarky of me. That's an assumption I'm making. Okay, I'm trying to be honest, Andrew. I'm really trying. Not to be assumptive, not to be snarky. I'm trying to give my honest opinion of things, but we do talk about human beings, and I want to be respectful of human beings.
That is fair.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that. Like,
yes.
It does sometimes become a little difficult when we're talking about like human beings, but we're also talking about like a system that doesn't treat human beings like human beings. You know.
Yes. Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
You can also let me know if you need a pause.
No.
Okay.
I'm good.
So I'm gonna double check.
Okay. So, transition.
Right. All right. So transitioning out of that to something, maybe a little more lighthearted.
Okay, our house. Shall we talk about the house?
Can we talk about the house, Grandma?
It's been a journey. And, my gosh. Teresa and Oscar have been incredible. So, Andrew and I are in a rental right now. And because the plumbing's being done at the other house.
Right. And
so we're in transition. I don't know why I brought that up even. But, so were you thinking of doing this before we came to the rental? Or is this something you came up after we got here like 2 weeks ago?
Well, I mean, I think we've discussed before, like, the idea that, like, I enjoy listening to podcasts, and I enjoy podcast format.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I've always thought that, like, maybe, that might be something that, like, that I might be interested in doing.
You doing, but not
yes.
me.
But, like, originally, I did have the thought that, like, I always wanted to have someone, with me in the podcast, like, because I'm not Bill Burr, and I can't just rant at the microphone for an hour, about my feelings on things and such. And, like, that's always been a little weird to me. So, like, the podcasts that I've always enjoyed are conversations. They are conversations between people that enjoy each other, that, like, have chemistry, this kind of thing. And, like, maybe have, like, possibly differing views on such, or,
You want somebody to poke you. Andrew, I can poke you. I can poke you.
Maybe a little bit of that, because I did feel like when I thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, I was like, I have friends that I love to talk to, and like we love to discuss things, even on like grander scale.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like a lot of it would be just general agreement about things, and
Okay, let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's back up a little bit more. So, how long have we both been living in the same house?
7 years.
Oh, fuck. Okay, so for 7 years. Okay. First 2 years were kind of shaky. Okay. But, especially, especially during COVID, but before COVID, was we got to the point to where there was a minimal morning exchange. Okay?
Yeah.
Especially if you were going to work.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm up reading my newspaper, drinking my coffee.
Right. John Jane Rich is on.
Yes. Thank you, John Jane Rich. We're paying tribute to you.
Right, shout out.
Okay, shout out. Okay. Publicize our podcast. Thank you. And by the way, Rich, I want some chips. Not chippy. I want chips. Anyway, but the afternoon, touching base, because you had been listening to podcasts at work, not telling your bosses, Andrew. I'm not ratting you out. Okay, ex-bosses, yeah, he was listening to podcasts.
Right.
Especially at the school. But he was filing. So that's legit.
I mean, I feel like that just shows how efficient I was at my job.
Yeah, you did good.
Inefficient management is. I don't know.
But Andrew, that was the highlight of my life. Every single day. And I don't know that you know this, but I listened for the sound of your car in the driveway. And you remember coming in and I would hit pause because I was always watching TV. Yeah. But I was looking forward to that moment. And sometimes it was a 10-minute exchange. Sometimes it was a 45-minute, an hour exchange. Okay? I'm in the recliner. You're sitting on the arm of the couch. And we're just going at it. Okay? And that was our regular routine. But then when it came to COVID, if I had been living by myself in that house, I don't know that I would have survived.
Like sanity-wise?
Yes, mentally. Yeah. So I think that is why this is possibly born, because that's when you and I discovered this exchange that we have. And so this exchange has been going on for 5 years. Would you say?
Okay.
Consistently?
Yeah.
Consistently for, at least for 5 years. We've been doing this consistent exchange, whether it's politics, whatever.
Yeah, I also felt like, because I've always known you to be an intellectual, and especially like when I would go to work sometimes and like interact with other people.
Humans.
Like I would not feel mentally stimulated. I would seek out podcasts for one to give me something, to learn about, and then like I want to discuss it with someone. I want to have this discourse. I want to share this, right? And I'm like, who can I do that with? Well, my grandma, she gets it. She gets everything that I talk about. So like, we're just gonna talk about it. Like whether it's cryptocurrency, whether
I
it's
still don't understand cryptocurrency, Andrew.
Which is fine, because most people who invest in it also don't understand what cryptocurrency is. And that's a very real fact. Anyone who wants to explain to me their white paper about the cryptocurrency that they're invested in, please let me know in the comments, send me a message. I'd love to hear it. Because honestly, I think you're full of shit.
So this is the evolution of those, because seriously, Andrew, I would look at the clock. And it was what, like, was it 4:45 or 5:45?
At the school, it would be, closer...
That you got into the driveway.
Closer to, like, right around 5, or right before 5.
Okay,
yeah.
So 4:45.
Yeah, 4:45, yeah.
It was 4:45. So maybe that's what we should call this, is 4:45. Generational exchange. Okay? Because that's where it started, Andrew. Is to where I did not, before we started doing that, I no longer, because I had a big job before that.
Right.
Okay, and I was a manager at the small home, but I was also in management over at a bigger retirement community.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had all this, stimulus, this, that, but then all of a sudden, I didn't have that, and then I just had stupid shit on TV. But then you and I started the discussion, so thankfully.
I'm super glad.
Yes.
And I didn't even, I'll be honest, I didn't make that immediate connection, back to...
But this is where it started, Andrew.
Yeah, that, like, those conversations, essentially were, the inception to this, like... Which is also funny, because, like, it's not like I couldn't have also at some point like talked to my friends, because also I did talk to my friends about some of the same subjects we talked about, But like, I don't know, getting to share with you and getting to hear like what you thought, I was like, I was also excited, Grandma, to get to share sometimes. I'm like, okay, Grandma's gonna enjoy this one, or like,
oh yeah,
like what are we gonna talk about with this subject? And I'll be honest, like some of those were like fucking Joe Rogan podcasts and random shit.
Joe, you know what, Joe, go eat some of those fucking snakes and screaming fucking beetles. And yes, we'll be on your show. Or not.
Oh, man. What's funny, Grandma's like, just a quick bit on Joe Rogan, I guess, since we're already here. Just to be that, like, I enjoyed that he had guests on that I found super interesting and entertaining, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who he had on, like, 4 different times. Okay. And I love hearing about the stars and aerospace, like any of that. Like that, yes. I found that super cool. And Joe was there to provide a background of questions like, hey, but what about this? And what about that? And what about aliens? Yeah. And like and I was like, I love this. I love this discourse that we're having.
Yes. I agree. I agree 100%. We cannot stifle information.
Right. And I love that he was platforming that kind of information, that he was platforming a scientist. And he was like, yo, this is a guy who like really understands space. And I'm like, yes, he really does. And it's amazing to hear him talk.
But what's getting hard though, Andrew, is that this whole thing as far as false information and false news. I am all for, everything has to be out there. But when things are fabricated, and there's no way for us to find out truly, has it been fabricated or not? Especially when it comes to hate. Mm-hmm. So, I'm sorry, I just had to throw that in.
No, I think...
Nothing against Joe Rogan.
No, and Grandma, I think you provide a great, because what we're talking about then, I feel like, is media literacy. And I feel like that's a topic that people don't talk about enough, which is, if you Google something and you phrase it a certain way, Google wants to provide you, right, with the answer to your question. And if you phrase it a certain way, Google will try to provide you with the curated websites that have a similar maybe answer that you're searching for. And Google uses your previous information to help curate the options that you receive when you're searching for things. So all of that is very important to know
Yes.
when you're deciding that, like, I'm just going to Google this. And I'm just going to find the first article, and I'm just going to, go with that.
And it's going to reinforce what I'm already believing in, instead of giving me a true counter to what I'm looking at.
Right. Which is why, like, for one, to give a little bit of context for, like, obviously, when we're talking about international news.
Yes.
For international news, I actually trust CNN and Fox and MSNBC a little more than I do on our national news. Our
I trust the Fox International. Okay.
Right, because I do feel like the Fox International is a little more. I don't know if the term is hawkish, but I feel like they're a little more xenophobic, I guess is the right word for it.
It's
like.
Go ahead.
But essentially, like, China bad or Russia bad is what I feel like I get a lot of the time from mainstream
So xenophobic,
media.
I think.
From even CNN or Fox, where it's like, hey, China's bad and you should be worried about China, and you're like, Russia's bad and you should be worried about Russia, and like before, and that was even before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. We were like, Russia bad.
And who said about the TikTok from day one?
Oh, Grandma's referring to the fact that China owns, or a Chinese company owns, the larger portion of TikTok.
From day one, all of you,
So
they've got you.
Right, just to provide...
They've infiltrated your life.
Just provide context.
That is my only... I don't believe in these...
what? Conspiracies?
Conspiracy theories,
oh, okay.
But except for TikTok.
Except for TikTok.
To a degree. Okay, I'm like 60%. I'm not 100%, but from day one, I've been 100%. Don't open TikTok. Don't do TikTok. But go ahead, Andrew.
No, I was just going to say...
and I told you that from day one, Andrew.
I'm just going to say, Grandma, like, there's very little difference between, like, the access that TikTok has had to people's private information that Meta hasn't, or Facebook before they were changed to Meta. So, like, the real difference becomes, like...
That's a foreign country.
There we go. Say it out loud, Grandma.
I said a foreign country.
Right, it's because a foreign country has my information.
Yes.
I'm worried about it.
Yes.
Which I do understand. Right, I do. I do feel like it would be used much more effectively against you by the company that is in the country and is then also trying to market products to you and your children and your grandchildren. Like, that company.
Okay, I'm not talking about right now, Andrew.
Yes. You're talking about...
Generational.
Because we're all... Okay, this is a conspiracy, Grandma. Now we are talking about a conspiracy.
60%. Are we close to the end of this podcast? How far in are we?
We can call it at any time. We're at 43 minutes. We've done pretty good.
This is a crazy way to shut down, but I think it's possibly a pretty good one.
Right? And like we didn't.
What do you think?
We didn't
tie it up. We
didn't even really have a topic, for this original podcast.
No,
I was trying to work out some ideas for it. I feel like in the future, I'll have more time to, one, get a topic, and then two, get videos for the topic.
Okay.
So that way, in between us discussing things, we can just be like, all right, so we're going to watch this video real quick, and get a reaction.
Okay.
And discuss. And I feel like that will, also help.
Okay.
Just not only fill time, but, kind of break things up.
I'll try that. I also feel that, like today, instead of establishing a topic, was much more organic.
Oh, yeah.
So we can discuss that.
How do you feel about eventually incorporating a visual aspect to the podcast?
Julia Roberts will play me. Or at least be my makeup consultant. Your mother sent me a ring once, but I think I lost it. You know, one of those little rings. But we have a big family event coming. Oh, so exciting! We have a big family event coming up.
We definitely do.
In 1 week from today. the quinceañera! My daughters are living vicariously through my amazing granddaughter, Addie Lee.
Shout out Addie Lee.
Addie Lee. So let's start with a fabulous photograph of you and I at the event.
Yes.
Because I will have some makeup on and I will be dressed appropriately.
I would love for that to be like something we could put on our social
media. That
media
will be
as well.
the post. Yes. Okay. So yeah.
Okay. So you want that as a placeholder?
Yes, that'll be the placeholder.
Okay.
And then we'll eventually get, once you can afford the hair and makeup person, yeah, we can go live. For the tomorrow, officially, 72-year-old woman.
I feel like sometimes like the live reactions, to things and such is like so telling.
But then again, okay, I need to preface this.
Yeah.
I'm on prednisone right now. And we can't do a podcast next Saturday.
Right.
We might have to do it Friday.
Okay.
Okay, if we do one. And I'll still be on prednisone. The week after that, I won't be on prednisone.
Right.
So I'm not promising anything.
Okay.
Because there is a crash after the prednisone.
There is, for sure.
Yeah. So.
Okay. All right. Well, with that being said, I feel like
that might have been TMI.
I think this has been a pretty great, first
it's a start.
podcast.
It's a start.
For where we're at. If you're listening to this, you've gotten to hear like the raw material between me and Grandma. If you have any disagreements with what was said on the podcast,
please. Only text Andrew.
Leave
me alone.
You can let me know. We can hash it out. We'll research it. It's fine. I'm not gonna say that I'm an expert on really anything. We're just here to talk. So,
yeah.
I appreciate y'all listening. I've been Andrew Chippy Chaparro. And you've been
Grandma.
Grandma.
Gamma.
Thank you all for listening.